All right. Good evening and good morning to everyone who is joining here for this session today evening. And welcome all. I will hand it over to Rupinder, who is a part of the ICF chapter. And she's going to introduce the guests today and the session that's to follow. So over to you, Rupinder.
Thank you so much, Shilpa. And again, a very warm welcome to everyone. It is such a pleasure and a privilege to host all of you on behalf of the ICF Pune chapter, to be here on a Thursday evening. Investing in self, I think that is the most important and critical piece. And that's also the theme for the topic today, for the conversation today. And personally, I feel taking a cue from the long-standing dictum of coaching practice, which says that who you are is how you coach, right? And if that is the fundamental dictum of our investment, I think it is time we stop looking at competencies and skills as the only way to mature into a better coach and into a better practice. The time is ripe for us to look at other avenues, other opportunities to explore the potential and capability of us as coaches. And precisely that is why ICF Pune chapter has launched a 5-part series under the banner of coach development. The first one happened in the month of March, where Latonya took us through the importance of diversity in coaching. And this one, which is very, very close to my heart personally, is led by Professor Duminda and Dr. Stephen Burt. If you could just say hi to the audience, profs, that'll be really lovely. A little background of this conversation is that Professor Duminda and Dr. Stephen have been working under the guidance of Professor Bob Garway and Dr. Clutterback, leading a very large-scale research study for almost 4 to 5 years now, and which has yielded some very extraordinary results around the theme of how do coaches learn and develop. So they've been very kind to extend their expertise, their insights, and also maybe leave all of us with some questions who are on our path to our own developmental arenas. So quick introduction, very warm welcome to both of you, and thank you for taking up the time for us to have this dialogue. Dr. Stephen is a PhD, he's a coach, he's a teacher, he's an author of the book, The Art of Listening in Coaching and Mentoring. Thank you again, Dr. Stephen. Dr. Duminda is a professor, senior lecturer in human resource management and OB at Nottingham University. He has been a researcher, I think almost for 20 plus odd years. He has phenomenal contributions to research and academia in the space of coaching and mentoring. Almost a pioneer, I might say, in IPA methodology as far as coaching is concerned, and a very, very close guide and friend. So thank you, Dr. Duminda, for being here again. I will take a pause here and hand it over to you on that part, trusting in your safe hands to take us through the next 60 minutes. Over to you.
Okay. I'll just say hello because Duminda's going to kick us off on this presentation, but you'll hear some more from me as we go on. My role now is to share my screen so that you can see some slides that we've prepared.
Thank you, Rupinder. Thank you, Stephen. Thank you, Rupinder, for the invitation to be here and share our research and bit of practice, experience from us. So the topic today, or our interest, is to know a bit about what actually we do as coaches to learn and develop, and also look at what we have found and how we have done it, and then to look at how that obviously impact our practice. So that was the intention of the session today, and I will just briefly give you a brief outline of the session today, and then move to talk about a bit about the context of the research. Can I control? Can we move to the next slide? I can't. Can I have the control? Oh, like, okay, perfect. So, so we will take you through the research question and give you a little bit of context to understand why we really wanted to know a bit more about what coaches actually do, and give you a bit of taste around what we actually know now and what has been done in terms of research, and then uh, how we actually develop this knowledge within the project that we started. Before going there, we will give you a bit of an understanding of our research team and backgrounds a bit. And then Stephen will take up and take you through what we have found and what it means to us as coaches and how we do go through that change process from novice to an experienced coach, and then explore how actually these impact us as practitioners and anything that we can do a bit more about research and what areas it looks like important to know a bit more as well, please.
Dr. Duminda, if I could stop you in between, there are a few messages saying the voice is not too loud and clear. So,
Okay, yeah.
yeah, if you could
let me
be a
try.
little louder. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. So, shall we move to the next one, please? So this all started in 2018 when we first met at Henley Business School. The team is relatively different compared to the team that we had initial meeting with, but what kept us going and keep us going is everybody within this team has a curiosity and passion to know more about what actually we do as coaches to learn and develop. So if you look at Stephen is obviously hold a doctorate, but more of a practitioner, plays more interest in practice, but of also having that research interest. Whereas for me, for example, I have a more research focus compared to practice, and we have Professor Bob Garvey, who was into more of research initially, now, turned a practitioner and so on. So this mix of practitioner, researcher engagement has been very rewarding for us, and for both research and for practice, I think. And we were learning from each other and also trying to create that impact and influence for wider coaching community through this research. So we have been working now for nearly 4 or 5 years. And one more interesting factor about the team is I've never met Stephen face to face yet, despite working closely for over 4 years. So that's who we are, and we have done quite a lot of work, and we have published some work from this research as well, which we will share after the session at some point, so you can dig deeper into what we have done. So all started by asking, how do experienced coaches make sense of their development? I would like to re-emphasize this question. How do experienced coaches make sense of their development? So we had a very much, a interest in how coaches have been through their journey, and also how they make sense of their development journey as a way of knowing, as a way of creating knowledge. I will get back to that a bit later in the session when I discuss a bit about the methodology. But with that interest of how coaches do what they do to learn and develop, we looked at a bit about the research to realize that nothing almost have been done directly to know what coaches actually do to learn and develop. And also we realized that this discourse of coach development is largely controlled by professional bodies. The little research evidence that we see is very much focused on outcome of coach development, from how the coach development impacts self-development, resilience, well-being of coaches, and so on, rather than what we actually do to learn and develop, or how that what we do helps us to learn and develop. So there's a big gap that has not been addressing for long, because coaching obviously is more of a coach's development. So we've been placing more emphasis and interest on coachee development, over coach development. So that may also have been an impact on what we know about coach development so far. So if you look at lack of research and some of the assumptions that we were governed by, coach development, I think informed by perhaps fourth century school systems. So most of the learning that we have been so used to do or undergo is about going from one to the other, first stage to the other. So the development, what we see now is more linear stage kind of development within that phenomenon and beyond, of course. And coaching is seen as a homogeneous activity. So the increasingly diverse world, we were trying to develop coaches from kind of one size fit all way of knowing, learning, and develop. So the other part of that is, kind of we have dehumanized development by taking self off from the coach development discourse, whereas history, the life events, our experiences has been almost neglected in current development programs, development discourse, and competencies. So it's seen as almost accumulation of skills, knowing a bit more about few more models, theories, and or acquiring a doctorate or a master's qualification and so on. So that's how we have been seeing or assuming how we as coaches learn and develop in the current context of coach development phenomena. So informed by those assumptions, most of the accreditations, the programs that we currently see in the market is kind of tired and competency-based frameworks that we kind of have to buy into despite our differences. And most qualifications are driven by, informed by those competency frameworks that are popularly marketed by many professional bodies. So almost even researchers I see, because there is the demand, as researchers, we were catering to that need rather than challenging and critiquing the current practices, where we were almost publishing and developing knowledge to support that discourse rather than challenging and finding a better way of knowing how we actually learn and develop. So we also see that discourse and that way of knowing and philosophy has informed us as our coaches' identity. What we actually do, the processes, the frameworks that we follow has informed who we are as coaches. So if you look at it a bit more critically, obviously, who owns the coaching or coaching development? What we see is professional bodies have a bigger say and control over it. Professor Bob Garvey recently asked, okay, who owns mathematics? In their paper. If nobody owns mathematics, why somebody should own and control coaching? So we see, that control mechanisms or power over what we actually do to learn and develop seems to have influenced critically on how we actually approach coaches. But as experienced coaches, as individual human beings, we know that life learning or our development is not that straightforward. So we are, like Rupinder very rightly put, your coaching practice is very who you are is actually, how you coach. So we got to have a better way, or we should have a better way of knowing what we actually do to learn and develop. And I pass this over to Stephen. Stephen, would you add something here and then take you through the next few slides, please?
Yeah, thank you, Duminda. Duminda set the scene for the work we've done, and as Rupinder said at the beginning, and Duminda just echoed there, the idea of who you are is how you coach is something that many coaches are talking about, and it ran through our research. And what we found because of that is that we collected a series of narratives from coaches that were varied enormously. And one of the questions that we hope you take away from this evening is a reflective question of what's your narrative? And perhaps linked to that, where does the narrative start? As far back as you like, but one key point in the narrative is when you become a coach. And one of the things that we would like to invite you to spend just a few minutes reflecting and sharing on is a key question in our research, which is what led you to become a coach? And we pose that now because it may be about accident and situation, but it also may be to do with some internal drivers that feature not only when you begin as a coach, but with you over a long period and maybe still be with you. So very simple question. What led you to become a coach? We're going to put you into breakout rooms for 10 minutes, and then we'll come back and very briefly share some of the answers to that. And hopefully that will give you an opportunity to engage with this research, but also for Duminda and me, we're really curious to hear whether what you say fits with or challenges what we heard in our research, because we do regard this presentation and others we're doing as ongoing dialogue around these themes. And so we're really interested to hear what your response is to this question. We'll put you into groups of about 4 or 5, I think, and we'll be strict on the time, 10 minutes, and then we'll come back and briefly hear a little bit from some of you about what sorts of things came up. Can I look to you, to Rupinder? I think you had this primed to invite people into breakout rooms.
That's right, Stephen.
Thank
Shilpa
you.
is helping us with that. Thank you so much.
Yes. And so we have 3 to 4 per room, and we're opening it up for 10 minutes. Just 1 second. And yes, I'm opening the rooms. So Stephen and Duminda, you would be moving between rooms. Is that right?
I think probably
I've not assigned you all rooms yet. But
don't assign us to rooms, please.
I mean, in 10 minutes, it would be difficult.
yeah. Okay. If you can stop sharing, it would be more clear who's not joined yet.
It's always nice to see that people come back after breakout rooms. We'll just spend a few minutes, please. What sorts of things came up in your groups in response to the question about what led you to become a coach? I'd love to hear from some of the groups, but also use the chat as a place to put themes that come up, please. Would anybody like to share from their group what sorts of things you talked about?
Sure. Okay, I can go in. I think we are in group 12.
Thank you.
Yogesh and I think Anu's were our team. So the common, what we reflected on and about our journey is about all of us we liked the reflective space, and we like the way we could develop ourselves in this journey of coaching others. So that was common in everyone. And some people started while they were in the job, and some people started after they had done their job. But primarily, it was about developing self and making strong connections with people, and the ability to help somebody grow, and in the process, energizing self.
Okay. Thank you very much. So there's some things that are focused on others, something focused on personal growth, and different practical steps. You said some people made a strong transition. There's some started when they were in another job. interesting what you say, liking reflective space, interested in growth, internal drivers as well as what might be happening in life more generally.
Right.
And I'm just looking in the chat from Lisette. By being coached. Okay, thank you, Lisette. Yes, so it's some experience of what coaching can bring. And if that is what is happening through coaching, then I want to do that as a way of life. Wow, that's a strong statement. Thank you.
We have and Rajiv who raised their hand, so let's take them up.
Rajiv, is it Rajiv?
Rajiv, yeah, Rajiv.
Yes.
Yeah, so in my group, we had Aparna and Dharmesh. For Aparna, it was because she has experienced coaching in her corporate. She, really felt the use of coaching, and hence she decided to move into coaching. I'm saying it in a short, but she expressed a lot more things there. And for Dharmesh, he was an agile coach, and then he was practicing meditation, etc. And when he learned about coaching from an authority in coaching, he kind of liked what that space was offering, and he got into coaching. And for me, I felt coaching skills would help me serve a certain set of people I wanted to serve. And there were a couple of mentors who were encouraging me to become a coach, and I took their advice, and I felt that skills would help me help a few people. So that's how I got into coaching. So these were the 3 reflections that we had in our group.
Radu, thank you very much. I mean, what I'm noticing, but then I might be a little bit biased because I'm steeped in this research, is that we're hearing both diversity and difference of routes, but also a degree of commonality as well. I mean, Rajiv, you said in the chat, a common theme seemed to be to catalyze realization of true potential. Doesn't surprise me hugely as a common theme, but quite how that featured for different people could well have been different. And there may be some other things that are different. And this seems important because one of the things that came through very clearly in our research is that when you start coaching, you are not a blank sheet of paper. You bring all sorts of motivations, experience, orientations, blind spots and baggage, so many different things. And some of that may stay with you positively as you grow as a coach, and others of it may be some of the things you need to address in order to become a better coach. We will come back to this. Duminda's going to talk a little bit about methodology, and apologies to those who are still adding to the chat. We'll have a look in a moment, but can't do now. Duminda is going to talk a little bit about our methodology, which is interesting for those of you who like methodology, but also it reveals our stance with respect to the narratives that we heard. So over to you, Duminda, and I shall share.
Please. And when you say methodology, I think it's all about how we have done what we have done rather than technical terms. So if I go back to the research question, which was how experienced coaches make sense of their development. So the interest first on individual human experience, how they make sense of that experience as a way of knowing. So our source of knowledge was human experience, which is a phenomenological research. So obviously we had 8 in research team, which was a very important element of what we have done because it helped us to innovate within the research methodology, which I will briefly explain. But so we employed interpretative phenomenological analysis, a research methodology, which is more of a health psychology research method, but increasingly popular in coaching research. So the idea of that is to explore individual human experience, to understand what actually happens within that particular experience as a way of knowing. So we have a particular emphasis on a theory called hermeneutics, which is about theory of interpretation, and the human experience as phenomenology, where our source of knowledge is human experience, and focus is on very unique insights of individuals before we getting into commonalities. So we dig deeper into 32 experienced coaching professionals around the world, from Brazil to India and Australia and the US and UK and so on. We purposely selected the sample and conducted a semi-structured interviews. Most interviews lasted 45 to 1 hour, 45 minutes to 1 hour. And then, the methodology itself suggests that a very ideographic way of analyzing line by line analysis of transcriptions to discover what actually this means for them. So we dig deeper into those experiences to understand. Obviously, multi researcher involvement in IPA research is very, very rare. We haven't seen any so far. So that is that itself presented a lot of challenges for us in terms of questioning the validity of this research. We bringing our perspectives into data and so on. So we've addressed most of this based on some of the theories and our professional expertise that within the room that we had. So we innovated a bit within the methodology, and we can publish a paper which we will share later on, because this is, as I mentioned, is a bit more tough bit in research to justify your methodology, what actually knowledge is about and what reality is. So I will take you through the process a bit very briefly, and then let's get to the results, which is more important bit for us as practitioners, I think. So we did the collection of data, as I mentioned, through semi-structured interviews, initially transcribed using a software called Otter. But then we went through the transcriptions one by one and corrected, transcribed it verbatim. And following IPA data analysis guidance, we analyzed, like every individual researcher had around 4 to 5 interviews to analyze initially. And then obviously we, as a team, we developed individual teams for these. Each interview we analyze, and then obviously cross-analyze the group that we analyze. And then Stephen came in as an individual to look at it holistically, and he developed 10 teams out of all the teams that we developed. And then out of that, through group discussions, we obviously selected 4 teams, which we then went back to data again and see what actually these means to participants. So it's quite a deeper analysis of experiences to develop what we have developed today. Part of the methodology, I will conclude this section from that. Part of this methodology is about inviting you as readers and our audience to actually make sense of these findings and see how it relates to, how it relates to you as a practitioner researcher. So please, as Stephen take you through these findings, please continue to reflect and question what it actually means to you, how you actually make sense of that. And if anybody is interested in the methodology a bit further, please be in touch and we can talk through it later on. Thank you.
Thank you, Duminda. I'm going to mention what's here, but go past it and leave it with you. And next question, in terms of your narrative, is about focusing on life events that have impacted your professional development. And one of the things that came through from our research from many, many respondents was that some of the most significant things that shifted them as coaches were life events, sometimes deeply challenging life events, such as serious illness or redundancy, bereavement, sometimes more positive in terms of accidental meeting with other individuals, but they've really highlighted this. It's been really crucial in terms of how I turn up as a coach and what I bring to coaching. And I'll say a little bit more about that as I put that in the context of the findings as a whole. We grouped the findings into 3 areas. One, drivers for growth. In other words, why do experienced coaches continue to learn? Secondly, about how do they resource themselves and the change that they go through. And then thirdly, what do they actually do? What are the activities and practices that they engage in? And I'd like to take you through each of those 3 things in turn. Drivers for growth, really thinking about firstly, internal drivers. And I think some of you touched on this when I'm responding to the question about why you became a coach. And this is about the things that are about you, your personality, your traits or orientation, love of learning, commitment to personal growth, deep curiosity or nosiness about other people, a need or personal quest, perhaps to intervene or have an impact on others' lives in a positive way. And this may accord with your purpose or values. And it may be as well, I think, as some people have already said, whether as coach or coachee, one of the things might be the experience of being in flow in a coaching conversation can be an incredibly positive thing in itself. And it may be something that will help you and drive you to want to become more experienced and more skilled in this area. So a whole range of different internal drivers, again, many overlaps, many commonalities, and each person we spoke to gave them their individual flavor. That may interact with life experiences. I've listed some of those that might happen, but things that you don't think about as being developmental for you as a coach, but may well be significantly developmental for you as a person. And the way those seem to impact, many different ways they can impact. The practice and who you work with, and the purpose you might have as a coach. One person we spoke to said he started off coaching because he wanted to change the world. And after 20 years or so, his focus is on helping an individual one at a time to get through hard times. Links to values and perspective on the world. Life experiences may impact your resilience, your ability to sit with people experiencing deep challenges. They may affect your humanity and your generosity or your view of others. And it may also lead to or be linked to other external changes and demands that go on in your life. So there's a whole load of things that are going on here. And that's before we even talk about coach development or CPD, or what we traditionally think of as coach development. One of the things that came through strongly, and this lies beneath and around the particular activities, is what the coaches told us that they did in order to resource themselves. That's resource themselves so that they can turn up and be present in the way in which they want to, but it also resource themselves so they have the resilience and the strength to engage with others in potentially challenging conversations. And particular activities here were things like mindfulness and meditation. Some talked about being in nature. There's a whole range of practices which are about supporting the self, supporting the spirit even. And this came through as really important for both being able to do the work, but also how the work gets done. I'll offer you a couple of quotes that perhaps convey this better than I can. The first, as you can see here, it says, how do you grow as a coach? Maybe create enough space to have a daily practice and just taking a few minutes to be making sure I get out in nature every day. I think for me anyway, it's about feeling a sense of connecting to a greater purpose. So you can see how, this was like a foundation or linchpin for the person who spoke about this, and you can see how it equipped them to be a coach. Another spoke about readiness and said, in terms of my readiness for coaching, it's physical, well-being, good health, good night's sleep, fresh air, all those things, so that I physically feel good, because I physically need to be in that space. So comfort and good health and not feeling tired. And quite basic things in a way, and perhaps things that you might talk about with your coachees if you're anything like me. that Duminda and I were reflecting that we're quite good coaches sometimes at spotting what others need and maybe not so great at transferring it to ourselves. The message we got from experienced coaches was that they do this. It's an important part of their practice. Okay, so that really is sort of foundational. Beyond that, though, what do they do? What sorts of things do coaches engage in? Let me show you this is 5 groups of activity that came through very, very strongly in terms of what they do. Let me talk a little bit about each of them in turn. Learning from experience is about doing coaching, range of clients, range of experiences, different challenges, different contexts, and so on. And just learning through the variability of experience. And crucially, and I'll say a bit more about this in a moment, reflecting on that experience and allowing it to impact their practice. The second area, repertoire and sense making, is about the things that we might do to extend the skills we have. We might do learn a new approach to coaching. We might do a master's program. But more than that, we might, and many of our respondents did, do other things that help us with our coaching. Might do some transaction analysis, might do some counseling training, might do some work around organizational development or organizational design, do some work about power in organizations, a whole range of things that can help them make sense of what they're hearing in coaching. Teacher as learner, not hugely surprising, but really surprising how much it came through, that those people who taught other coaches, ran CPD, worked in higher education institutions, or acted as supervisors, said, I learned from doing that. I learned from working with novice coaches because they do things I would have never thought of. They also talked about learning from the community, like some of you are doing in leading the Pune chapter. I would imagine that you learn through that activity, whether it's through being in and organizing sessions like this, but through conversations with the people you work alongside. Sometimes the formal conversations, but sometimes just the chat, perhaps, before you have your proper meeting. So people told us the whole range of ways in which they engaged with other coaches, both formally and informally, helped them to learn. And then lastly, being in supervision and following other reflexive practices like journaling helped the process of uncovering and capturing and then applying the learning. We do this as a flow because often these things support and impact each other. But what's really important here is that this is only in one small element about CPD and formal courses. That's got a role to play, but there's so many other things that coaches do that seem to support their development. And some of these things have happened intentionally because they've sought them out, and other things have happened quite accidentally. And then somewhere in the middle, some things have happened because people have put themselves in the way of accident. They've gone to something not knowing what they'd learned, but thinking they might. That's like the conversation in the coffee bar at a coaching conference. You didn't know you were going to learn that there, but you knew you were in the right place for that possibly to happen. So it's a whole range of different things. And one of the things we were curious about was, well, how to make sense of this? Or is it just scattergun, load of different things? Well, no, because what came through really clearly was that the red thread connecting all of these things is reflexive practice. Every one of these activities can support you in reflecting on what you do and what you might do differently. It supports your self-awareness, so spotting what you do in the moment in a coaching session. It supports your ongoing self-knowledge in terms of who am I as a coach and what often turns up. That enables you to find your learning edge in the sense of what's the next thing or the next area of my practice I want to develop. And it gives you a direction of travel in terms of, over time, what seems to be becoming more important and what less so. You may align that with particular intentions or goals, but the crucial thing is it helps you decide what in your practice do you keep, what do you drop, and what do you develop. And so this reflexive practice is so important. it's like so many areas, if people tell you they have a huge amount of experience as a driver, for example, in a car perhaps, doesn't mean they're necessarily a good driver. They've just been doing it for a long time. If, however, they've had feedback and they've acted on it, then maybe they'll be quite good. So it's the same as many areas of learning and endeavor. That's a rapid run through, really, of what we found. And there's a lot in this. And I think what we'd like to do is to pause briefly and give you an opportunity to digest this by talking to some of your peers. And it's asking about what's your night, Harry. So what have you done to help you develop? You've probably done lots and lots of things, but what stands out? And what else has helped you develop? Have there been things that happened accidentally? And if there's time, how's that changed over time? What sorts of things did you do when you were a relatively new coach? But if you've been coaching for some time, what do you do now? Has it changed? And then again, we'd like to hear briefly some narratives back from you. So what have you done? How has it helped? I think the two key questions. And perhaps before
So there's a quick question from Babu Raj, Dr. Stephen. Would you want to take it now or after the breakout?
I was going to say, yeah, if you've got questions for clarification, then please, now will be a good time.
Babu Raj, would you like to phrase that question yourself since you're on the call? I think you'll do more justice to that.
Thanks. Actually, you will also be able to do justice. But anyway, thanks, Stephen and Duminda, for this session. Two questions which I had in your third slide, which you mentioned about assumption. And one is on assumption and second one is on practice. On the assumption, what you have said that the coach development is linear and it is staged and it is homogeneous. So I want to understand, can you explain that? And I want to understand why that assumption has come and from what's the base of having that assumption. Because on the third point, when on the vertical, on the 3 column and the last point, when you said, Duminda, when you said that, you also indicated contradicting to that particular assumption. So how that assumption, number one. Number two was that on the practice, what you mentioned is that it is content-centered and not person-centered. I would love to have little explanation, knowing the time paucity. Just give a little more explanation so I understand that.
Perfect. So why we are saying it is stage and content driven is, if you look at any sort of development program now or accreditations that we have for coaches to become a master coach or practitioner, whoever it is, there's the whole learning and development is framed by the stage model of learning, rather than appreciating the individual differences that we have, diversity we have, and appreciating humanness within that. So we have been looking at every individual as somebody who's not somebody who's unique, but as individuals as homogeneously, and defining or designing programs to fit into everybody despite looking at who we are as individuals. So that's how we see as development or course development programs are more homogeneous rather than unique, and appreciating those differences and diversity that we have. Did I bring that clarity in? And what was your second point?
The second point was on that practices, content-centered and not person-centered.
Oh, okay. So if you look at the competencies, for example, okay, or the content of the programs, if you look at for any sort of coach development programs, more of it is about, again, informed by that approach, where it's about what you should know rather than, what sort of changes that you have to, experience or who you should become. More of is about what sort of knowledge and skills that you should acquire. So that's why I'm saying, or we are saying, it is more of content driven rather than person driven. Stephen, would you like to add anything to that? Very good question, by the way.
Yes, it is. No, I don't think so. I mean, if Raj has is that okay, Raj?
Yeah, carry on. I got some idea about what you are talking about. It there was some confusion because I have taken coach as an individual, and then now you are referring it as a developmental process and program, which is actually staged, and that is what you are referring to. Okay, fine.
Exactly. So what we have seen is it's almost we are so comfortable to understand learning as a linear process, because we are so used to it. It is easier to administer, evaluate, and kind of come to an end and give you a certificate or an accreditation rather than seeing it as a continuous development process as well.
Fine.
There's a lovely irony in here as well for us as coaches, because we would start with where in a first conversation with the client, we'd get to know them and find where are you? What do you have? What's challenging? What do you bring? And all, in a sense, all we're saying is, well, how about we approach coach development in the same way? Rather than saying, here is the agenda, now you work through it, irrespective of who you are.
Just another bit. If you look at adult learning theory, if you look at it from theoretical perspective, so where it's about more, considering adult or the learner as a more resourceful person, which we try to do in coaching, more, letting them to make sense of their learning and development and so on. So having that learner or the coach as a resourceful person who has the ability to kind of know, kind of make sense and, define their way of being. But we have kind of restricted that flexibility and humanness within those programs that we try to put them in and try to fit in.
Yeah.
Right, please. Thank you.
Pleasure. Shall we do a breakout?
Yeah.
Okay. A reminder that the question was, if I can find it, what have you done to help you develop? What stands out for you in the light of what I've said? Do you recognize what I'm saying? Be really curious to hear from you. So we're going to take another 10 minutes, put you into breakout rooms and have a brief wrap up when you come back. And what we'll move then into a more general Q&A before we finish. Is that okay? Who has the magic button to create?
I do.
Thank you.
So 10 minutes again this time?
10 minutes, please. Yes.
Okay. There have been a few changes because I see there are a few people who've dropped out, and so there's been a lot of rearrangement in rooms. So there is a possibility it might be just 2 people in a room. Is that okay? Or should I make it 3 or 4?
It's up to you. 3's better, but it might be complicated. So
okay, just give me a second. Okay. Yeah, this is the best I could do now. All right. So, Rupinder, maybe you could come back to the meeting room. Okay, thank you. I'm just opening the rooms now. 10 minutes from now.
Hearing from all of the people in the room, Shilpa and Kalpesh, is that I see so many people from the Pune chapter. That's my biggest, happiness apart from, yeah. So many of them, so many of our colleagues in the room here. It's just beautiful. Hi, Lata. So good to see you after so long.
I would like to ask everyone to stay on video so that I can take a pic before the others.
Yeah. Absolutely. That will be lovely.
And also there's a question about the CCUs. We will send that across in a week's time max. You don't need to fill any form, that's fine.
I think everybody is in now, so
excellent.
Yes. So can we have a smile and I'll take a pic, and Stephen, you can take a go then. All right.
Got a picture?
Yes, got it.
Good, good, good.
Thank you.
Okay. Curious to hear, what sorts of things did you talk about in terms of what has enabled your development? Be great to hear from some who didn't get a chance to speak after our last breakout. What sorts of things were you talking about? And please use the chat as well. I saw a hand go up, Kartik, and then Chitra.
Yeah, so in our group, a common aspect was our involvement with our own spiritual growth and development.
Right.
Yeah, whether it was through consciousness work, or whether it was through yoga work, or whether it was through the Vedic culture that has prevailed in India for 5,000 years. And a few things that came up in common was I was sharing how my 45 years of involvement with yoga and training teachers in yoga made me create a yoga psychology coaching model where both aspects get taken care of, the coach's own development as well as the client's development, because we are both on parallel journeys. Doesn't matter at what level we are and where we are, and therefore any investment that we do for our own growth and development as a coach is going to translate in me becoming a better and a more effective coach in what I do.
Thank you very much, and that's beautiful description. Yes, and you've just been working at this stuff for 5,000 years. So it's good to be reminded of that as well. Chitra.
Thank you, Stephen. I think this is a very interesting discussion and engagement. I think in our group, we had a couple of us who really talked about how, for instance, I use contracting with group work that I do as well as an individual to be able to actually see as to, and contracting with even open communication. How is it that if there's something that goes awry in the engagement or something that interpersonally that we're connecting with, we need to put that out so that that informs the other about what can go on even outside of the space. So it becomes a learning point each time. It doesn't just happen in coaching, but also in supervisions. So at the process level, what is it that I get informed about myself and the other? And also one of us talked about also the energetic level. So when you work with the energy field, what is it that is at an energy level, even in a group setting, something keeps shifting and is dynamic. And that in what's getting shifted informs me about something that has gone on interpersonally, or even something that has happened even within me that has got in some ways triggered or transformed. So I think these are all learning points for me to take back either into my own personal work or into my supervision, and therefore continue to explore, or there's an encouragement that can be opened out in the coaching space.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. Great. Thank you very much. What else?
Hi, this is Lata, and thank you so much. It's been a very insightful session. Really enjoyed how you opened up our minds to how many ways we develop in. And one of the things I noticed in the breakout room conversations was the fact that every life experience also comes in to build the journey. So whether it was one of my colleagues who was learning swimming, he talked about how he became more present, to listening to philosophy, or taking care of your own well-being. So very interesting aspects.
Thank you. I mean, that's a lovely example. I do quite a lot of work separate, well, it's related, but particularly around listening. And it's interesting that things like being present and the ability to be intuitive and really pay good attention, we need that as coaches, but we don't only develop it as coaches. It can come from so many other places. So that's sort of that interpolation of different experiences, and we each do our own curation of our learning and our experience in terms of how we bring it to our professional work. And I think it's fascinating to hear a little bit of your stories on this. we can have a few more questions and answers before we finish, but I'd just like to share, I mean, as with all of the work like this, I hope one of the questions that you'll take away from it is, well, so what? Or more particularly, so what for me? And I'd like to say a few things that might help a little bit with that. If I can share again. And where are we? Just moving on from this. One of the things, and I put this as a speculation because it's very much bubbling under in our research. The question really is well, what sorts of learning, what sorts of change are going on as coaches develop? In other words, what are the processes, internal processes? And you'll see in this that at the top in the middle is acquiring. Yes, we do that. We learn new stuff. We learn new skills and techniques and models and so on. But that's just one thing that's going on. A big message from our researchers, one of the key things of becoming an experienced coach is letting go. Letting go of who you were before, letting go of what you learned when you were a new coach, letting go of the thing that you thought was working for you that no longer is. In so many ways, there is a simplification going on as well as things, perhaps more simplification than things becoming more complex. But perhaps there's other things going on as well. Connecting and collating, bringing different strands together, harnessing what you had. What Kartik said about spiritual experience, spiritual shared history, drawing on that in order to be the coach that you want to be. Maybe some reimagining or accepting of who you are, both good and bad. Together, that comes together into what, rather than mastery or any other word like that, we've chosen to capture under the heading of becoming. Becoming because one of the very strong messages from the coaches that we spoke to is that no matter how experienced or how good you are as a coach, you're never done. If you think you are the final product and you are the finished coach, then actually you will soon become a problem both for yourself and your clients. And so rather than a process of arrival, it's a process of continual learning and becoming. If we had another 5 years, I'd love to dig into all of this a lot more in terms of, what sort of psychological and cognitive process and physical and emotional processes are going on in terms of growth through all of these different activities. Perhaps this gives you something to think about, and particularly think about yourself. Some key takeaways, though, for us are, as it says, coaches are neither blank sheets nor islands. They have a history and a life. Our professional development and our development as human beings are intertwined. Getting more experience is not enough. Reflexive practice is essential, and that needs to be supported by professional associations, supported through a whole range of practices, supported through supervision, but also supported as we think about how do we design coach development. And that development is not only about learning new things cognitively, but there's a development of mindset, and it can be intentional and accidental. And that, as I hope we've illustrated, many different activities can support this reflective practice. Theories and models have got a place, but I would argue, and I think we would all argue, that they're the key place is to support the sense that coaches make of their experience and their ability to collate and to capture and understand what they are. And certainly if you are involved in coach development and you're working with new coaches, one of the things that we would wish for is that somehow the possible journeys ahead would be explained, and that the idea that it is not about ticking boxes or moving up through a hierarchy, but about finding your way through a complex and individual set of things that may support you or may not in serving your clients and becoming a better coach. So really positioning the journey as, rather than going up steps, rather more of a sort of an exploration in a foggy land. And really, to summarize the key takeaways here, personal is professional. It's a process of self-discovery rather than acquisition, driven and enabled by reflexive learning. Becoming a coach is a way of being, not an outcome, and it's never ending. And as I said, it's a matter of letting go and integrating, not just acquiring. And I noticed I had an acronym, so I looked it up, and apparently Padana, as some of you may know, is a Pali word, which has a variety of meanings according to context, but one of the meanings it can have is footprint, which I love as a sort of image that might link to a personal journey. So those are some of our takeaways, and just to go back slightly, any questions that you may have, be happy to respond, but also any reflections you care to share about what all this might mean for you, either as an individual professional or someone who may be leading or helping to develop other coaches.
Someone raised their hand. See.
Raj.
Yep.
Please speak to us.
Yeah, I have two questions again.
Okay.
One question is that in your slide, activities and development, you have put it in like a cycle.
Yes.
So does it mean that each coach goes through each of that learning process, or most of the coaches go through most of the stages? What is that when you are putting it in a cycle, it is expected that it is like a moving. So that is number one question. Number two question is the last slide, which you are talking about it as far as reflexive and reflexivity in qualitative research. And therefore, when you have mentioned reflexive practices, can you explain what you mean by that? Because I know what is reflexive coaching, reflexive practices in qualitative research, but in the context of what you are explaining, could you give some example and say that what are the reflexive practices? These are the two questions.
Okay. First question. A core message from our research is that there is not a single path for coach development.
Mm.
Each person finds their own path. They may, if I think about myself, for example, I do particular things which really put me in a position, like today, as for want of a better word, an educator of other coaches. I'm putting some things before you, I hope, which will help you grow. I learn from that. It's something I do sometimes, but nowhere near as much as Duminda, who teaches HR specialists or other members of the group. So our individual practice is quite different. And talking to the coaches we spoke to, not all of them will tick all of those boxes. I've never been involved particularly in a professional association or coaching community, other than informally. So I don't really think I tick that box. But I know that it is something I would develop from if I chose to. So I think the flow perhaps misrepresents perhaps what it should be was a number of different circles, some with hard lines between them and some with dotted lines.
Right. That's what I thought.
And there may well be some things that aren't there, that some coach that you speak to say, well, what was really important for me was my learning as a gardener. You say, what? And they explain why. Yeah.
Quite true.
And secondly, reflexive practice. It's the simple point, really, that if you think about models of adult learning, particularly Kolb and double or triple loop learning, an integral part of that process is reflection. And it feeds back into practice. And I think we're saying that is what happens, rather than just the sort of simple acquisition and taking in of knowledge or experience. You need to be an active learner and work on what you're exposing yourself to in order to work out what it means for your practice.
Yeah.
So it's reflexivity in that sense.
Understood. Understood.
And
Thank you very much.
finally,
Actually, I actually wanted to respond to your last question. What are, so the footprint that Padana as a coach, and therefore I would love to, on behalf of all the team members, I think I would love to compliment, because qualitative research, and especially for 32 people, bringing it out, nuances, and then converting it into specific themes. And for me, it's a single word is that it's a lot of food for thought as a reflection.
Thank you
Thanks a lot.
so much,
Thanks.
Baburaj. That's very kind of you. Rajiv, you have a question?
I'm curious about one thing. What is the measure of development, if any?
That's a good question.
Wow. I think the methodology we had and what we're finding, I think, makes it very difficult to measure development. And it's one of the attractions of competence frameworks, is that they sort of give you something you can measure. However, I think our challenge to that is, well, it may be measuring something, but it has no particular reality as far as we can see. Perhaps one thing that might give you an indicator of coach development is the maturity of the narrative that coaches have about themselves. If you can account for your practice and how that has become your practice, then perhaps that's evidence of reflexivity and learning, which you can't measure it, but certainly if I were interviewing you as a prospective coach for me, it would give me confidence that you had done as much work on yourself as you want me to do on myself.
And just to very briefly add to that, to measure what, we got to also know what to measure. So, like how you look at coaching and how you look at coach development is also very important, sense making that we have to do within that space before we think about what we actually should measure and how we should measure. There's a lot of discussions around that. I know time is very limited.
Yeah.
Should we take one question from Damesh, who's been
Yeah,
patiently waiting?
let that be the last question, please. I'm also mindful of people's time, and I know this discussion is so rich that probably 90 minutes is just a trailer of sorts. So maybe we can pick that up one more time. Dharmesh, you're on mute, I
Damesh.
guess. You're still on mute, Dharmesh.
Yeah, sorry, not a question, but it was more of a compliment to Dr. Duminda and Dr. Stephen in terms of the research, the extensive research to such a vague topic, and then putting the structure to it and presenting it to audience like me, who is not involved in the research as such, but in a very layman's terminology. So great job at that. And just the answer to what Dr. Stephen asked, is in terms of how does it matter to you. So as I'm getting into the coach training, I think I would take this more as how the coaches who are coming for the training, how they develop as a person, and some of the pointers that you have shown in your slides and the research. I think that would be really useful for me. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. So Shilpa, can I take this 160 seconds
Yes,
to
all
officially
yours.
close this session? Thank you very much, everyone, for being here and making this discussion what it was designed to be. I'll just give, and it's not justice to the work that you've done, a disclaimer, Dr. Stephen and Dr. Duminda, but three things that I'm carrying away largely from this is, really development is nonlinear and contextual. We need to move as coaches from competence to capability and reflective practice. And last but not the least, that identity formation is really central and human-centered practice has to take the norm. I was in a national conclave in Hyderabad and discussing how supervision has changed really my own pace of development. I think the central line for me, which sort of, if I can use that to anchor the discussion today, is that it's really what you learn after you have learned it all is what matters. Yeah. And that's really the starting process. So thank you so much. Thank you once again, Dr. Duminda, Dr. Stephen, for this very, very enriching discussion and a good reflection for all of us to start back with. Thank you to all the participants. Just remember the questions, so what now? And have a wonderful, wonderful reflective weekend going ahead. God bless.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good night.
Thank
Bye,
you,
everyone.
everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.